going on, guys? Jay Santos here, league commissioner, here with my main man, Dougie Fresh. How you doing, boy?
Hey, man. You still can't land that word, but we'll forgive you.
How did I do it wrong this time? I said commissioner.
It doesn't sound right, man. It just doesn't, it's not right. It's commissioner, and it doesn't roll off your tongue, and I'm sorry about that.
Well, I put more emphasis on there purposely. Commissioner. I don't know how it doesn't sound right, but we'll move on. We'll move on. All right, so you guys know the rundown. Best, worst player performances, and also surprising, players. Best, worst coaches, waiver moves, Week 4 matchups, and recaps of our picks, along with this week's bye weeks, and then also next week's previews. So let's start it off with the best performances. I have some players here that, for QB, that performed pretty well. Trubisky, Goff, and Luck were the top 3 scoring quarterbacks this week. I mean, Trubisky is Blake Bortles. You're going to get games like that. Maybe not 6 touchdowns again, but, I mean, it's kind of hard to miss wide open receivers. There was blown coverages everywhere. The Tampa Bay Bucks defense is piss poor, but he actually performed well in the game, so I got to give him credit for that. Goff is, I said it in the last show that Goff is the most underrated quarterback in the NFL, and even I didn't see that game coming, throwing for 5 touchdowns against a pretty good Minnesota defense. Sean McVay and him are just on the same page, and kind of surprising. And then Andrew Luck throwing the ball, I think 60-plus times. They should have won that game. We'll get to that game later on in the show, but I think Luck played pretty well with a bunch of wide receivers that are, nothing special. So it was a good bounce-back game for him.
Yeah, Trubisky's a guy I've been absolutely slaughtering. I think we called out last week, this was the spot. If he can't do it in this spot against this Bucs defense, then he definitely sucks. So I guess we'll give him a couple more weeks. Still, if you look at the rundown, he didn't none of his receivers had a big game. I guess Taylor Gabriel. I don't know. I just feel like against that team for fantasy purposes, Robinson or Burton or somebody needed to go off in that receiving core, and didn't really feel like anybody did except for Gabriel, which no one was expecting. So I guess good on him, but that defense sucked. Goff, some of those throws that dude was making in that game on Thursday night, he was dropping dimes.
Yeah.
Up the seam, 35 yards on a rope. That dude is very, very impressive.
Yeah, that I think it was a 50-yard touchdown pass to Brandon Cooks. It was right after Xavier Rhodes got kicked out of the game for the time being, and the next pass, 50-yard laser to Brandon Cooks in really good coverage. He's a stud. All right, for running backs, it was Kamara, Zeke, and Melvin Gordon. This is what we expected when we picked these guys in the first round. These are our studs. These are RB1s. These are the guys that we're relying on. It's just fortunate for Timmy that he's got 2 of the top 3 performing running backs from this past week. Kamara's a stud. Zeke performed extremely well in a plus matchup, so proving that he actually can carry the Cowboys team. And then Melvin Gordon, he's catching passes out of the backfield. A lot of people didn't think that he was going to catch that many passes out of the backfield this year, but I think he's second on the team in targets behind Keenan Allen, and he's not that far off from Keenan Allen. So we should just expect these kind of point totals out of Melvin Gordon more times than not.
Yeah, I agree with you on Gordon. I've said before, I don't really like him as a player, but he's just apparently perfect for that scheme for catching balls from Phil Rivers. Zeke, I thought, as a Cowboy fan, sometimes I fucking hate him because he looks just like a bitch. looks like he wants to cry, and he's like kind of whining and not really putting out the effort. But he looked like he was running hard. He was playing hard in the passing game. This was like a pretty good get right spot for him, and he did it. Now, like you said, it was a plus matchup. Like Detroit's defense is not that good. I think the Cowboys' offensive line still has a little bit of work to do until they get Frederick back. But definitely, if you own Zeke, as Nick does, and these are the kind of weeks that he needs from him. So good to see. And then Kamara, I mean, what can you say? Like, just every week he scores like 40 points. It's kind of a sick joke. We'll see what happens when Ingram comes back. But like, I don't know how you stop giving this guy the ball.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying in the last show. They're running him into the ground, and you don't really want to do that just 4 games into the season. I was actually at that Giant game against the Saints, and I'm telling you, man, like he doesn't have a lot of wiggle. He doesn't cut, he doesn't do like 3-4 combinations of a juke. It's just one cut and he's gone. It's amazing his stop and go speed whenever he decides to make a cut. He's incredible. So for wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Golden Tate, and also DeAndre Hopkins were the top 3. You want to start this one off?
Sure. So I didn't actually see much of that Thursday night game. I know I was referencing some of Goff's throws, but that was just the highlights. Goff clearly has an affinity to throw the ball to Kupp. He must be very reliable, always knows where he's going to be. So, Kupp along with Woods and Cooks, like everybody's kind of viable there, like maybe even all at the same time. So it's pretty impressive, especially against that Minnesota defense was supposed to be one of the better units in the league, and they just fucking shredded them. So, Kupp, I guess you kind of can, I don't know you're going to expect 32, but he's going to go for double digits, it seems like, every week, kind of like with his eyes closed. Golden Tate, guy I've always liked coming out of Notre Dame. I mean, he was catching balls and then taking a shit on a plate and then leaving it on the doorstep of the Cowboys before he ran in the end zone. He's just like a super scumbag on the field, and I really kind of appreciate it. But it seems like in Detroit, it's now becoming Tate and Galladay, and Marvin Jones seems to be taking that back seat, whereas coming into the season, it kind of felt like maybe Tate would take that back seat and it would be Galladay and Jones. So I guess kind of a situation to monitor. Golden Tate doesn't seem to be slowing down whatsoever, and Stafford really trusts him. So I think you'll see a couple more games like this from Tate. And Hopkins, it wasn't even just him. It was him, it was Fuller, and it was Kute. All had pretty big games. So it seems like Deshaun Watson's kind of coming around and distributing the production quite nicely in Houston.
So his last name is Cootie, so not Kute, but I digress.
I thought he was French. He's not French?
No. So you can't say Cootie, I can't say commissioner. So we'll move on.
I can say it now that you told me how it's pronounced.
Commissioner.
Questionable.
All right, so Cooper Kupp, yeah, it's like what you said. I mean, all 3 of those guys are going to be productive. So far, they've proven to be, I think, all 3 are top 14 wide receivers. Do I think that's going to happen throughout the rest of the season? I don't, but I could see top 20, which I don't think we've ever seen that before, having 3 top 20 wide receivers all from the same offense. But it's crazy that it actually could happen. Yeah, Golden Tate, he's leading the team in targets. Stafford and him have a great connection. I agree with most of what you were saying about Galladay and Tate, but Marvin Jones is still beating him, Galladay, that is, in targets on the team. But I think that doesn't really showcase how well Galladay has done with his targets. He had 4 catches for 75 yards, and 3 out of the 4 catches were unbelievable.
He's special. He's really special.
He's a special player. And DeAndre Hopkins, this is what we were waiting for all season, for him to have one of these blow-up games. Is it surprising? No. It'll actually be more surprising if he doesn't have these kind of games. For tight ends, talk about surprising performances. Jared Cook, another 25-plus game. George Kittle and Travis Kelce round out the top 3 tight end performances. Yeah, like I said, Jared Cook, I said on the first show or the second show after week 1 that was going to be his top performance. I was wrong. It looks like he's no longer the Jared Cook that we've known for his entire career, and he's actually pretty much the number 1 option in that offense, which is crazy, to say if we were going into the season. George Kittle, a lot of those points came off of a 82-yard catch and run, but how many tight ends could catch and run 82 yards? I mean, we just saw last week that a couple wide receivers got run down by linebackers on some long bombs, and this guy beat the entire defense for 82 yards. He's incredible. Do I think he's going to have this kind of performance, again? I don't. Not with C.J. Beathard at quarterback. They had Jimmy G there. I definitely think that this could have happened again, but it was a bust coverage play, but he did still lead the team in all of the receiving categories, so that's promising for George Kittle. And then Travis Kelce, he didn't do anything in the first half, and then the second half, he was basically carrying the receivers. I think he was 7 catches for 100-plus yards and a touchdown. It was great to see, one of the premier tight ends showing up in a big spot.
Yeah, Kelce, he dropped a couple of balls in the first half, but then Watkins was out, and they were kind of in throw mode. They were behind in the game, and he showed up. Mahomes obviously likes him. Mahomes, another story. That dude's a fucking hammer, like real life and fantasy. But yeah, Kelce's going to do stuff like this, especially how bad their defense is, especially if Watkins misses a little bit of time. Kareem Hunt ran well in that game too, so the defense kind of had to respect both aspects, run and pass, which I think helps Kelce. So, good to see out of him. Kittle, we talked about. Beathard has kind of an affinity to throw him the ball, and that showed up a little bit in this game. A little bit of a shootout too. So, we'll see. I think he probably ends the season as a top, 5-6 tight end just because of the situation. And then Cook, this dude's just kind of like a fucking sore, in the fantasy realm. Why is he good? People just got lucky having him in redraft leagues. In this league, it's fucking stupid that this guy is good.
Yeah, it makes no sense. He's been terrible his entire career, but this year has been a little bit of an outlier as opposed to other years. So let's see if he continues this going forward. Now moving on to worst performances. Josh Allen, we knew he was going to be on this list at some point. We also knew Fitzmagic was going to be on this list. But Breeze, not so much. I was at that Saints-Giants game, and they were moving the ball up and down the field, and whenever they got into the red zone, the Giants did a good job of shutting them down, which was surprising. I know Drew Brees, he could have had a touchdown to Watson, but he dropped that. But I don't expect to see him in this spot again. But like I said, the other two, yeah, we saw this coming.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick, it just reminds me of the first show we did with Wortman, and he was like, the magic wears off. The magic wore off, and they benched him, and now it's over. The magic is gone. It's disappeared. Poof. Allen, he's probably just not that good. So he's probably we shouldn't even talk about him anymore because he's not relevant for our purposes. And Breeze, when Kamara drops a 40 biscuit, they don't really need a whole lot from him. Probably give a little bit of credit to the Giants secondary, but it also is a product of the Giants offense being pretty fucking brutal. So all they wanted to do and needed to do was run the ball and eat some clock, and they were doing it effectively. So he didn't really need to do a whole lot through the air, and he didn't.
All right, so moving on to the running backs, we have Dalvin Cook, Jordan Howard, and Kenyon Drake. You want to start this?
Sure. Dalvin, again, game flow worked a little bit against him, but something seems off about this situation. A lot of people had high hopes for him coming into the season, and he just kind of hasn't produced at all. I guess we'll see if that defense can get a little better and they can be in a little bit more positive game scripts for him. See if he can kind of get going. They're going to need him, I think, if they're going to be contenders in any way. Howard, Cohen is really eating into the workload and has proven to be a pretty explosive player that they need to be kind of getting involved. So, we'll see if that continues to eat into Howard's workload. And then Drake, like the play calling is just so bad. Even in like passing situations, they've got Frank Gore in the game. It doesn't make any sense. Miami blows. You can't trust them.
For all three of these running backs, I'm still pretty optimistic for all three. I'll start off with Drake. I said last week that, the 2 points per game was not his floor. I mean, when Adam Gase is your coach, I guess so. He's still the best option that they have over there in the running back group. So it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know, maybe he slept with Gase's wife or something like that. I don't know why he's not getting as many touches as he should over Frank Gore. But I think, or I hope, that changes sooner rather than later.
Drake cucked Gase's wife. That's nice. That's a good image.
That's a good team name right there. Jordan Howard, this was the game where everybody thought, oh, this is the Jordan Howard game. He's going to get 30 touches. They're just going to run the ball because they're blowing him out. And then Tariq Cohen was the one that was actually running the ball and blowing them out. I didn't see that coming. It didn't show, or they weren't doing the running back touches like that in the first 2 games, so that's a little surprising, and I don't think that that's going to be the norm moving forward. And then Dalvin Cook, the guy's coming off a torn ACL. I think we all forgot he was coming off a torn ACL. First couple games, he scored double-digit points, and he's coming back hurt. His hamstring is still not 100%, which he said. So I do see this being his worst game of the season, at least the ones that he plays. So for a wide receiver, Mike Williams, Keelan Cole, and Chris Hogan. I mean, Chris Hogan, not the player that I think we all expected him to be this year. Pretty piss poor attempt for filling in for Julian Edelman. Keelan Cole, it was a DD game this time. 2 weeks ago, it was a Keelan Cole game. It's, they're going to have these kind of games as far as the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers players go. Next week, it could be, I don't know, the third wide receiver, whoever that guy is, Moncrief. Moncrief can go off again. And then Mike Williams, this is what I was saying last week. He's going to have these great games, and he's going to have these piss poor games. He had 3 targets. He only caught 1 of them. Game flow wasn't really in his favor, but I mean, the 49ers were coming back in that game. So I don't know what happened, but like I said, he is more so touchdown dependent than he is, reception and yardage dependent, because they just don't use him like they do with Keenan Allen or Tyrell Williams. What do you have to say about those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue a little bit that the game flow, actually was pretty good for the Chargers to have to throw the ball. And like you said, he's just going to kind of disappear from time to time. Cole, you're going to see this from Cole, from Westbrook, from Moncrief, from whoever the hell else they have, catching passes down there. Some days are going to be big for some of these guys, and you're going to have weeks like this from any one of them. So expect to see, any of the Jacksonville receivers, on this list from week to week. And then Hogan, I don't know, game flow worked definitely against him in this game. Be interesting to see if when Edelman comes back this week, if that kind of frees him up a little bit and takes some of the coverage away, and if he can kind of get back to what he was doing last year, which was kind of a red zone guy, but also a little bit down the field, catching 15, 20-yard passes. So I would say if Hogan, give him one more week, and if he doesn't do anything this week, I would be definitely concerned.
I'm totally off the Hogan bandwagon. I mean, they got, like what you said, Edelman coming back. James White is still catching passes. Gronk is going to catch passes. Josh Gordon, his role in the offense is only going to grow. I don't see Hogan being a consistent receiving threat, out of the Patriots wide receivers. He's going to have some games where he blows up, but so are like 30 other wide receivers that have already performed that way so far in the NFL this season. I think he's just going to get lost in the shuffle as the season progresses. For tight ends, Austin Hooper, Dallas Goedert, and Benjamin Watson were the three tight ends that didn't really perform all that well. I said it before, Austin Hooper, he's going to have great games, he's going to have bad games, just like most of the tight end position. Dallas Goedert, he really got phased out of the offense. I think he only had 2 targets in the game. And, with Alshon back, they used him in the red zone when they were running 2 tight end sets beforehand. There were more 3 wide receiver sets this time, and they really funneled targets to Zach Ertz. So the good thing is if Zach Ertz goes down, Dallas Goedert is going to get those, 7+ targets a game, but he's going to need an injury now that Alshon's back in order to, what I think, produce on a regular basis. And then Benjamin Watson, like I said, he dropped a touchdown pass. He's touchdown dependent, and there's all you have to say about that.
Yeah, Hooper's just a guy. Goddard, I agree. I would argue a little bit that Tennessee's defense might be better than we think it is. I also think it's only a matter of time before Alshon is dealing with the next injury, kind of the story of his career, at least the last few years. And Watson's like 100 fucking years old. So, these are guys that'll definitely show up on this list again.
I also put the Eagles team. Nobody would have thought that the Titans were going to win that game. Again, nobody thought the Bills were going to beat the Vikings, or nobody thought the Lions were going to beat the Patriots. But at least this week, I think as a team, the Eagles did not perform all too well to what we were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles aren't who we thought they were. Leave it at that.
They can't get any pressure on the quarterback. Their backbone is their defensive line getting home at the quarterback, and when they don't, it completely exposes their trash of a secondary. So they're going to have some problems if they don't get to the quarterback.
Last year, but is not.
Correct. Surprising performances, Marcus Mariota and Derek Carr. You were kind of sandbagging Marcus Mariota, a couple weeks ago. He just needed to be healthy in order to perform well. He's not going to perform this well, and they also had overtime, so that padded the stats a little bit right there. But even without overtime, he still had a really good game, and I think he's going to be, scoring between maybe 16 to 24 points on a consistent basis, maybe more so. Maybe I'm being conservative on that, but I think it's going to be more consistent as we move on. And Derek Carr, kind of less optimistic about that, even though they did perform well against a pretty good Cleveland defense. What do you think?
With Carr, I think Cleveland's defense is maybe not as good as we thought they were. And I think Oakland's defense is maybe a little bit worse than we thought they were. So, I think Carr can, he can have some games like this, especially in that division. There's not exactly, really stiff defenses in that division. So, between Cook, Jordy, Cooper, I think he can kind of get it going. He's obviously got a big arm, can make a lot of throws. So, Carr will have some of these games. Mariota didn't do much on the ground, so I think that's where he has a lot of value. But again, we outlined, like, the Eagles' defense maybe is just really not that good. So, with how good Tennessee's defense has played, I wouldn't expect Mariota to have to put up numbers like this on a consistent basis for the team to be competitive. So I wouldn't expect to see him, with this kind of production.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Running back, I mean, I disagree, but fair enough. James White, Mike Davis, Naheem Hines, and Nick Chubb. Yeah, most of these guys, we do not see them scoring 22 plus points. James White had a great game. I do not see that point total happening again now that Edelman's back. And, as I was saying before, Josh Gordon's going to get more integrated into the offense. What we do know is that Tom Brady trusts him, so he will get his, piece of the pie. But, he had a long touchdown run. Don't really see that happening more times than not. Mike Davis didn't see that happening. I mean, nobody knew he was even going to start that game until about 5 minutes before the game, where PD Sunshine, says, "Oh, Carson can't play, but we don't want to put our first round running back pick to start the game, so let's take the veteran off the bench and have him start the game." He actually performed really well, but I don't expect that to happen again. Naeem Hines, I like the outlook on Hines. They have him in a Darren Sproles kind of role. One of the catches that he had for a touchdown was he jumped over. It was a little bit of a push off, but he jumped over Tyrann Mathieu for a touchdown in the back end of the end zone. So that was pretty nice, and they're gonna have that role for him the entire season because their running game does not exist, and Andrew Luck does like to make short little dump offs to Naeem Hines. So I do think his role is going to be sustainable, maybe not that point total, but sustainable as we move on. And then Nick Chubb, man, once that guy finds a crease, he is gone, which is scary because he's 235 pounds. He's strong. He doesn't have any wiggle. He did make one nice move to make a safety miss, but it was a little bit of a move. But once he finds a crease and he just, goes 0 to 60 real quick, I'm excited to see, when the Browns are going to give him the keys to that backfield because I think he's going to do pretty damn well.
I'll work backwards. So Chubb, I agree. As a guy who owns Carlos Hyde in a couple of spots this year, concerned about Chubb eating into that workload because he's clearly a more explosive back. That said, Hyde is still pretty effective in the role that they choose for him. I don't know what Chubb's outlook is in pass protection. They still got Duke Johnson there in kind of the receiving role, but anybody who can put up 110 yards on 3 carries probably deserves a little bit more work. So Chubb probably gets a little bit, a couple more touches as we go forward here. Hines, I think Marlon Mack left that game, and Hines kind of just took the opportunity and grabbed the job, in my opinion. As you mentioned, in that kind of satellite type of position, but not a bad spot. Defense isn't great. Good quarterback. Probably is able to parlay this into some better games coming forward. Mike Davis is curious. So he, if you remember, coming out of South Carolina, was a pretty highly rated prospect. I would say probably was at one point the consensus top back in his class 3 or 4 years ago. Had a gruesome knee injury. Took him a little while. He spent the whole first year on IR. And I think he got hurt again. But he's a good player, and he could be what Seattle has kind of been looking for. And you typically, we touch on the waiver ads at some point in this segment. I grabbed him. He could maybe grab this job. They obviously don't trust Penny. Carson has been bounced around. They've used him. They've not used him. Davis, I think, with another couple of games with this amount of opportunity, could kind of cement himself as the bell cow in this backfield. We'll see. He has he was that kind of prospect coming out, so we'll see. James Sweetfeet White, I agree with you that Edelman coming back probably hurts him. but he's also really good. And Brady, as you outlined, trusts him and loves him. Michelle's coming on as a runner, but no Burkhead. I think White can kind of sustain. I think right now he's like a number 15 running back for fantasy purposes. I think he can kind of stay there just with the amount of volume he'll get. So I like James White a little bit more than you do.
Yeah, I've had him on most of my teams over the years. I don't have any shares of him this year, but you kind of know what he's going to give you. He's going to give you probably around 6 to 8 catches a game. But I do have to say, I think I saw something that he had his most carries or second most carries of his career this last game. I do not see that happening again, especially when he's been in the league for 6 years. And this game was his second most carries of the year. But I do think he does have that passing down role, down pat. And also, it's kind of on steroids since you also have Tom Brady as well. Moving on to
real quick, one more thing on James White. You think about the situation the Patriots were in. This was kind of a must-win situation, facing a division opponent that was 3-0, 2 games ahead of them, and he was the guy they turned to. He was the guy they trusted. So I think that says a lot about a guy. So, again, I agree with you. There's a lot of mouths to feed there, but this guy has a clear role in this offense, and that's not going away.
To James White's credit, and now we're making this whole show about James White, but who do they turn to when they were down 28-3 in the Super Bowl against the Falcons? That should have been James White that got the MVP in that game because he was pretty much the one that brought them back. So all right, so now enough James White. Wide receiver Taylor Gabriel, Dede Westbrook, and Kiki Kuti were the 3 most surprising. We touched on a couple of these, actually all 3 of these guys. Don't see at least Gabriel and Dede putting these numbers up consistently. But Kuti, I don't know if you saw the rookie recap that I did, but I put in there that Kuti was a really good player. He was going to perform well when given the opportunity because he's exactly what the Texans need. They have Fuller on the deep routes. They have DeAndre as the red zone and possession wide receiver, but they've never really had that shifty slot kind of guy. They wanted Braxton Miller to be that guy. Then they brought in Bruce Ellington. They wanted him to be that guy. I think Kuti is a 4th-round pick. This is exactly what they envisioned. Maybe they didn't envision him getting, 15 or 11 targets, whatever it was that he got. That had more to do with Will Fuller going out of the game. But I think he's going to be someone that they turn to as one of their focal points in the offense. And I think this is definitely going to be something that stays consistent throughout the season.
Yeah, Kiki Kayute. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really see this game, but it would appear that the production is out there. They don't have a tight end. They don't really have a pass-catching back. They've got Hopkins and Fuller. And then you're right. They kind of needed somebody in the short to intermediate area to catch the ball. Could be this guy. Refresh my memory. Somebody drafted him in this league and then I think dropped him. And I just saw Wortman spent a pretty good nut to pick him up. Who drafted him?
Yeah, Wortman just outbid the same team that drafted him. That was Kevin. Kevin drafted him in the 4th round, and when he made his roster cuts, he cut him.
Could prove costly.
Yeah, and I think Brian only outbid him by $1 too. So it's a deep burn.
That's it. We don't need to talk about Ebron.
Yeah, Ebron's there, but actually he is performing pretty well in the red zone. But that's going to change once Jack Doyle.
Yeah, he's about to have a problem, and that problem is Jack Doyle.
Yeah. Well, also Jack Doyle sometimes is the problem.
Well, Jack Doyle can be a problem, but typically when you have a problem, you call Jack Doyle.
Yeah.
So, like, Ebron's going to be like, shit, I have a problem, it's Jack Doyle. I'm going to call Jack Doyle.
You've been listening to the fantasy radio too often. All right, so coaching, My worst coach for this week was Frank Wright, Jack Doyle's coach right there. Not because he had an awful game as a coach. The Colts could have came away with a tie. Do I hate him for going for it on fourth down in a normal situation to go for the win? No, I wouldn't hate that decision. But they had the ball on like their 35-yard line. There was 20 seconds left in the game, and then they throw like a hook route just beyond the line of scrimmage. I mean, yeah, well, pretty much just beyond the line of scrimmage. So even if he caught the ball, you still wouldn't be in field goal range, or you would have brought Jacoby Brissett into the game to do a Hail Mary to win the game. Instead, you don't get the fourth down, and you hand the Texans a guaranteed win. That was probably up there as one of the worst calls that we're going to see all season. So although he doesn't deserve it for the entire game, that was probably the worst call he's going to make as a head coach. And when it comes to Sean McVay, he's the best coach in the NFL, at least on the offensive side. The way that he creates mismatches, no one would say that Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, that they're, bona fide superstars. Maybe Cooks. Cooks is up there as one of the better end wide receivers, but nobody thought that with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and the way that he just implements his offensive game plan, it just makes it very, very difficult for defenses to keep up with them. All right, so those are my best and worst coaching picks. What do you got for your best and worst?
A lot of worst, as is typical for me. Patricia, just to the simple fact that he continues to give LeGarrette Blount the ball, it's a fucking joke. Is he fucking blind? Yeah. Kerryon Johnson is running for 6 yards a carry and dump trucking people. Mm-hmm. And LeGarrette Blount is running for -1 yards a carry, but is still getting somehow 10 carries a game. It's so fucking sad. Maybe it's not him. Maybe it's Jim Bob Sniff your cooter. No matter what, it's awful. The Dolphins didn't watch really a lick of this game. All I know is that they were 3-0 with a huge spot. You win this game and you're almost in the playoffs. And I would imagine the way they lost was pretty uninspired and just no effort. It's just a joke. Dan Quinn, they should have won this game. Atlanta, the offense is good, and you give up a touchdown pass to AJ Green of all people with 3 seconds left in the game. You have to know that that's where they want to go with the ball, and just at least defend him. You want to let Tyler Boyd beat you, let Bernard beat you. Let the backup tight end beat you. Don't let AJ Green catch that touchdown pass, and they did. So I thought those all were pretty bad. My best is Andy Reid. He makes this kid quarterback look like a veteran. So there's obviously a lot of really good preparation going on. He's window dressing the shit out of every play. There's 4 guys in motion on every play. You know that it's all so that help Mahomes read the coverages and understand what the defense is, and it's obviously working. So I thought Andy Reid was pretty impressive.
Yeah, there was, I think, one play where Tyreek Hill ran 50 yards before the snap. He motioned all the way over to one sideline, then he spun around, went back to the other sideline, then ran around Mahomes to try and catch a screen pass. It's great. Andy Reid is an offensive genius, and it worked out in their favor.